In this video, I'm going to talk about how to future-proof your career by learning Revit and learning BIM, what the differences are between them, and how you can actually start to implement by the end of this video every single skill which I talk about in order to take you from an average career to actually start to thrive and put you on the correct path for success. Revit and BIM will completely future-proof your career, right? And I'll show you exactly why it's so important and give you this exact step-by-step framework by the end of the video. So the reason this is important is because of these 3 or 4 images you see on the screen here, right? Look at these construction fails. Imagine a world where you're building a bridge and you build them from both sides and they don't meet in the center. How much is this going to cost? It's going to cost tens of millions of dollars in order to fix, because now it's useless. Imagine you put a door, these are real pictures by the way, you put a door in the middle of something and there's nowhere to go after the door. This is not properly coordinated, okay? And so now that door is useless. You got to seal that door off, or even worse, you got to remove that door and then seal the whole area, or it's just not going to be used. So in this case, that's going to cost the company tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Look at this. This is even worse. You have people literally cut the pipe in order to get other pipe around the pipe, right? I said pipe a lot of times, but that's the idea here, is like you might not even be able to fix a lot of these things in the first place after you have made the mistake, after you've made the fail. So like you have to use dirty workarounds like this, or you can see the pipe is going through the ductwork here. So they've actually welded and sealed everything around the pipe, and that's also another fail. So we're trying to prevent these 4 scenarios. There's so many other examples of things like this happening in the construction world that we're trying to prevent, and this is actually why learning Revit and specifically learning BIM is really good and a really good skill set to have, because a BIM manager, a BIM coordinator is the person that actually prevents these things from happening. So their salary, right, or their value is very highly justifiable, very highly quantifiable to companies, and that's why they are in such high demand. So this video is going to apply to you if you're an architect at any stage in your career, an engineer in the building services industry, or a student, architect or engineer. Okay, so firstly, we need to identify what's the difference between Revit and BIM, because a lot of people think that Revit is BIM, BIM is Revit, and they don't understand what it is, and they use these 2 terms interchangeably, but they have no idea. So that's what I'm going to explain to you in this video, right? So they're actually completely different things. I will explain to you and give you a complete training on the differences between these 2 things and how they're used. How is Revit used to prevent these clashes? How is BIM used to prevent these clashes? And which one you should learn and how you should learn them at what stage in your career, okay? If you stay until the end of the video, I'll actually give you a 4-step roadmap that you can implement within the next 30 days in order to take you from Revit beginner to someone that understands Revit and BIM to a high level. So you'll be actually able to apply for jobs and stand out in your career as an architect or an engineer. So I genuinely believe that you'll be able to take that roadmap and implement all the steps and never have to worry about your skills holding you back in your career ever again, right? So having said that, here are some of the projects that I've been working on currently. And we'll go through how I use Revit, how I use BIM for each one of these things initially, so I can give you like a visual demonstration so it will click in your mind, so that later on as I go and explain these things and give you the roadmap, it'll start to make sense and it'll start to click, right? So this is a project that I've been working on. It's a hospital in Australia, and I will show you an example of sort of the types of things that I've been working on. So I'll pull this out over here. This is that same hospital, but this is just one level, right? It's just one level of that hospital. And what you'll realize is that you can see everything on that level. I've cut this level out, and this is not actually Revit. What you realize is this is the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So you will use Revit in order to model it. You will send it to the Autodesk Construction Cloud, and the BIM manager, the BIM coordinator will create this whole environment so that you can see everything inside the ceiling, right? If I cut a section over here, you can see everything. Look at all that ductwork. Look at all the pipe work. You can see everything inside there, right? And this is actually nice and beautiful because it's actually been coordinated, but most of the time, it's not going to look like this. So I was actually able to coordinate all of this, and that's the reason it looks like this now. But that is a BIM coordinator's job, because as you can imagine, if you have this pipe which is clashing with this duct, and you have this pipe which is going into this duct, or you have a pipe which is actually going through the slab, because you have like different slab thicknesses over here, right? This is thicker than that. This is like hollow. You have like a lift here. There's so many different variables that if you don't know how to coordinate these things, they go through each other, and on site, it's going to be a nightmare. So that's why we do this virtually in the computer. We coordinate everything before we actually manufacture this, send it on site, and everything's good, right? So creating this whole environment and doing this whole coordination is what I consider to be BIM coordination. It's the bread and butter of BIM coordination. You will be doing clash detection and creating sort of the workflow, or like the working environment where you can see the whole model. Like for example, this is the architectural model. These are the ambulances, but you can see all the ductwork there as well, right? All the pipe work, and you'd be able to see all the sewage and plumbing and everything. So that's sort of what the end outcome is between BIM and Revit. That's a difference. What I showed you was BIM management, BIM coordination, is making sure everything is perfectly coordinated in that construction cloud. But Revit, you will use to actually design that and then sync it into the cloud. Okay, so hopefully that distinguishes between what Revit and BIM is in your mind, so you know what the difference is when I go to explain this further on. So I showed you the video environment. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you the difference between, I'm not going to tell you the difference. I'm going to go through each of the skills that you learn from BIM, and I'm going to tell you the result of not doing them. Okay, so this is important because I want to explain to you how important it is to actually know these skills. And bear with me for the next like 3 minutes, because this will make a lot of sense once we finish going through all of this. So with the BIM skill set, you need to learn how to set up the project on the cloud, right? So setting up that environment like I showed you before, where you can see every single service in the ceiling, the architect, the structural, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all of that needs to be set up on the cloud. You have to then assign correct permissions to consultants, contractors, and architects for collaboration. Okay, so like the architect needs to see the architectural stuff. The hydraulic guy needs to see the hydraulic stuff. The mechanical guy needs to see the mechanical stuff. You need to assign the correct permissions. And what's the result of not doing these things, right? So if you never set up the project on the cloud, no collaboration happens in the project. So like the mechanical guys will be putting the ductwork in. The hydraulics guys will be putting the pipe in, and they're going to be clashing. So on site, it'll cost like $500,000 to resolve all these things, or $1 million in order to resolve these things, right? That's how expensive it is if there is a clash, or if there's too many clashes. If you don't assign correct permissions, then no one is able to coordinate between services. Everyone is modeling blind. Again, this is like multiple millions of dollars lost for the construction company. Making sure the consultants and the architects' models are always up to date, right? So like what you saw before when I showed you like that whole layout of that hospital, you need to make sure that the walls are the correct thickness. If the architect changes the ceiling heights are the correct thickness. Because sometimes if the ceiling's raised, there's no space for the duct, or the hydraulics pipe, or the electrical trays. Like there's no more space. So if you don't do that, contractors will model in the incorrect services, and again, there'll be clashes on site. You can't just lower a ceiling after you've installed it. That's the problem, right? Again, multiple hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars lost. Making sure all the contractors' models are up to date and in the collaboration environment. If we don't do that, like electrical, mechanical, hydraulics, plumbing, if they're not up to date, the construction team can't make decisions about timeline and resource allocation. The builder is not going to be able to know, okay, the electrical guys are behind, the mechanical guys are behind, like who do we need to push? How do we stay on budget? How do we stay on target? And if they're not able to do that, there's delay costs associated with it later on that they have to pay to the client, who's above everyone, the person that wants to build the whole hospital. So what happens? If we can't do this, then they start having to pay like late fees to the client. So there's a huge stress behind that. So they want you to learn this so that you can help them save time, keep on budget, keep on schedule, keep on timeline, right? Running an automated clash detection between services. Like what if you can't do that? Then there's going to be clashes on site and millions of dollars you'll have to spend to fix it. It's as simple as that. Like let's go back to this, right? If I click issues here, you will see that there are so many issues that have been assigned to different people, right? And some are open, some are answered, and some are closed. So they can be either open or answered or closed, right? And so if they're answered, they get assigned back to me. If they're open, it means that it's still a clash. And you have all these things that you can assign to other people so that you don't have to send emails back and forth. Imagine there's like 300 clashes. Imagine sending 300 emails to this specific person. It's easier to just click it on the model because it's automated, right? It'll do it automatically for you. Okay, this is a clash. Type in the person's name, send them a message. It'll send it on the construction cloud. So you don't have to worry about your inbox being full, right? So it saves time for everyone and there's not going to be clashes on site. Again, millions of dollars. Assigning relevant clashes to the relevant contractors and architects. We talked about that. We're not going to lose money there. Coming up with creative solutions if necessary to resolve clashes between services. So if there is ductwork, if there's hydraulics pipe, if there is electrical trays, and they're all so congested, right? Maybe you can find a creative solution to flatten the duct. You can flatten the duct. You can make the trays go along the side of the wall, and that way you can keep the architect happy by having a really high ceiling height. Things like this, creative solutions that you have to do, you have to think logically and critically. You don't need a lot of experience. You do need some experience, which you'll learn on the job, obviously within 6 to 12 months. It's a very quick learning curve. But if you're able to make quick decisions like that and make creative solutions, you'll actually be able to keep the project sustainable, right? So if we can't do that, the project cost will be very high, the project won't be sustainable, and the cost of the construction team, it will cost the construction team hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Make sure all services are resolving the necessary clashes every single week through coordination meetings. This is an important one because the BIM coordinator, the BIM manager, is actually going to be sitting in on meetings and talking to every single contractor, every single consultant, and asking them about what is the correct way in order to coordinate. Like, do we have to coordinate? Do we have to lower duct? Do we have to lower ceiling? Do we have to, and like how we coordinate? So if we are not doing the clash detection, there is no data to do the coordination meeting. So everyone can see it and everyone has a central point of truth by looking at the model. Otherwise, if we go off 2D drawings, there'd be some guy that's done the whole 2D coordination and saying that, like, okay, hydraulics has to move or like fire has to move, but then everyone has to take that guy's word for it because there's no single point of truth. The model, Autodesk Construction Cloud, BIM, the thing that the BIM coordinator does is creating a single point of truth and managing that so that everyone knows, okay, this is the place that everyone can see, and because everyone has the same eyes, everyone can see the same thing, right? No one can trick anyone else into thinking that an architect has to lower a ceiling height when they don't actually have to, because you can see it on the model. So that is why this has become so mainstream as technology has evolved over the last couple of years, right? So hopefully what you understand from this table is that just by not doing the tasks that you need as a BIM coordinator, millions of dollars are lost in the construction industry. Millions of dollars are lost for your company. And if you flip that and take the inverse of that, that means that if you're able to successfully learn the skills that a BIM coordinator does, you save your company hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So what does that mean? It means you're very highly employable, you have a very good skill set, and you can actually go and tell your boss that you are worth this much, you've saved your company this much money over the last couple of years, can I have this raise? You have a reason and figures in order to present to your company to tell them this is the value I bring in, this is how much I think I'm worth, rather than just not being able to do that in the first place, right? So this is why learning the BIM skill set on top of Revit is really important, because I believe personally, after a year of learning Revit, you got to transition into BIM, because if you don't, you're sort of getting into that stagnant territory in your career. And if you like Revit modeling and that's what you like to do with the rest of your life, then that's good. But if you want to really succeed and propel, get into management, coordination, project management, technical skills, all these high leverage activities, you need to learn BIM, right? So the below activities are some of the activities that people think BIM managers need to do, right? You'll see a lot of courses online, and what people will say is that a BIM manager needs to do family creation, they need to do template creation, they need to do library management. Like, that is what the BIM coordinator does. They manage the libraries, create the templates, create the families for the firm so that everyone is on the same page. No, that's like, yes, I mean, that is what a BIM manager does, but it doesn't matter if the BIM manager does that or not. Because if the company is a startup, right? If it's just a brand new construction company, then yeah, these things might be important because you're trying to systematize the whole company. Like, you want to create families, you want to create templates, which, by the way, everything is on the internet. So you can actually get good high quality templates, you can get good high quality families. Why would someone need to sit there modeling families for 20 hours when they can just buy it, right? So a lot of construction companies, when they're starting off, maybe at the start of the industry, you might have needed to learn these things. But the bread and butter is learning coordination. Because if you don't learn coordination and you don't know the differences between MEPF, architectural, structural, steel, and you don't know how to do coordination, you are not going to be able to save the company millions of dollars. So the key insight here I want you to take is, whatever helps you save the company hundreds and thousands, if not millions of dollars, is the skill you should be learning, because it's the skill which is the most leverageable, and it's the skill that everyone wants you to give them, because you can literally save companies millions of dollars. Do you think that this saves companies millions of dollars if you create some families and you create some templates and you create some libraries? Like, no, it's not going to give the company much, right? So if you are going to companies and you are approaching them and you are saying like, hey, I can do this whole coordination skill set where I save your company millions of dollars, they're going to say, yeah, I want you to help me. But if you tell them, hey, I can do some family creation and create some templates for you, they're going to be like, look, I can already get that from the internet. So if you think this is what BIM coordination is, you're correct, but only 2%, okay? Because 98% of BIM coordination is this. This is the bread and butter, okay? So these activities might be helpful in order to increase the efficiency of a company, but what matters is how much you can save the company, right? So like, if you don't do the actions that we talked about here, it will cost the company millions of dollars to fix anything on site. So hopefully, I already talked about this stuff, but hopefully from a monetary and financial perspective, you understand why just learning Revit is not enough, and why BIM coordination, learning the BIM skill set, is more valuable from a company financial perspective. That's all, right? Not in terms of like a passion perspective, because you might like to do Revit, but from a monetary financial perspective, which is also the reason your career will exceed, because companies want your career to exceed. Like, your career will excel at the same rate at which you can provide value to other companies. BIM is the way, because it provides the most value to the most companies, right? And it's got the potential. So I talked about coordination and clash detection before, but what do I mean by clash detection, right? You might have a vague understanding of what it is, but you might not know specifically the tasks I would do in order to consider what clash detection actually is. So the bread and butter of BIM coordination is actually clash detection. And you can forget everything else, but you can't forget clash detection. And so that's what I talked about before, right? I already talked about how they don't need to organize families and libraries, however, knowing that might be good. So essentially, what a BIM coordinator does is they make sure they go through every single clash, and they see using BIM clash detection software to determine which one of them are actual clashes, which one of them are actually not clashes, what is the priority of services that need to move if there is a clash, when does it happen by? Is it next week? Is it next month? When are the construction documents coming out? So like, when do we need to do it by? Are there any discrepancies between the 2D contractual documentation and the 3D documentation? And the skills I need to know for this are Autodesk Construction Cloud, BIM 360, Revit, and Navisworks. So if you're going to take something from this video, actionable steps, learn these three, okay? But if you want to take the 80% of what matters in order to get you the results, learn this, which is BIM 360 and Autodesk Construction Cloud. If you can learn how to create coordination views on Revit, send it to the ACC, BIM 360 Construction Cloud, and actually run a clash detection, it's not too hard, very simple skill set, then you know how to become a BIM coordinator, right? Very simple. You can forget about these two things, because Navisworks they don't even use anymore, because it's not on the cloud. And Revit is a new sort of program which is used, especially in Australia, on a couple of projects which I've been working on. But the bread and butter is BIM 360 and Autodesk Construction Cloud. Go and focus all your attention on learning this skill, and I promise you, you will be able to start doing coordination stuff at your office, or you can transition into BIM coordination, BIM management later on. So this is what it'll look like in the programs, right? So you'll see some red stuff and some green stuff. This represents the clashes. If I actually go back to what I showed you before, and we go back to this thing called clashes, you'll see that, look, some things are red, some things are green, right? So I'm actually filtering the architectural against every single model. So you can see everything is clashing. It makes sense because since like everything is on the ceiling, it's picking everything up as a clash. But it's your job to go through every single one of these and actually identify what is a clash, what is not a clash. So you'd be able to click on one of these and then you'd be able to go down, and then at the very bottom you can either select that as a clash or you can select that as not a clash. So that's your job to do. All right, so this is exactly what I showed you before. This is what it'll look like. All right, so this is the skill. I wrote this wrong. This is the skill that you need to learn in order to make sure that your career is rock solid and future-proof, right? You'll be able to do the modeling as a Revit guy. You'll be able to do the design because as your career progresses as an architect, you will know how to do design because you're working with Revit and you're working with BIM and all this stuff. And you'll also have the technical skill set, right? So you know how to do modeling, you'll be able to do the design, you'll be able to do the coordination. And so what is there left? There's nothing. You're an architect that knows how to do tech Revit and knows how to do a complete BIM workflow. So like there's nothing holding you back in your career. Now you're unlocked. You can start propelling and going into these different sort of jobs and actually start to stand out. So essentially, you know how to do any part of the whole project, and if they assign you to a project, you would technically be able to do the whole project from the start to the end. And this is the reason that you'd actually be able to start your own architectural or engineering practice later on. Let's just say you are an electrical engineer. If you're an electrical engineer, you can start by helping residential projects and then move on to commercial. So let's just say you get an apartment. You get an apartment, they say, let's do the electrical stuff for this apartment, okay? Well, now what you have to do is you have to be able to do all the designs and then do all the calculations and load calculations for that apartment as an electrical engineer. Then if you are working independently, you should be able to jump into Revit and then do the whole Revit modeling process. Then you should be able to create a construction set of documents. Then you should be able to coordinate all the other services around electrical so that everything is perfect. And then you're done, right? So you've done every single person's job as an electrical engineer. And the same goes for mechanical, same goes for structural, same goes for architectural. So by learning Revit, by learning BIM, by learning the coordination skill set, you can actually start to become independent. Like that unlocks you to independence if you want to become if that is your aspiration, right? So the reason this is so important is if you want to be an independent architect or independent engineer, you would be able to start your own consulting practice because you work as the designer, the modeler, the coordinator, the architect. You essentially handle the whole project without having to hire anyone else. And this also gives you context to think. So if you wanted to hire someone from another country that is doing, for example, Revit modeling, since you've done Revit modeling for so long, when they say it took them 20 hours to do this part of the building, you will know if they're actually lying to you or if they're not, because you will know how much it took you to do. So like it's about learning the skills so that you can start a business later on or you can actually thrive in your current position, right? This is why people in the building services industry keep working even after retirement, because they can work for themselves at home if they have the whole skill set. It's a very chill job. You stay at home and you can do your own calculations. You can do your own Revit. It's behind a desk all the time and you can essentially work for yourself, right? So let's talk specifically about your career as an architect or an engineer. And so this is actually the most important part of the whole video. So if you're getting distracted now, scrolling down to the comments or scrolling TikTok, make sure you put that stuff away. Because I'm about to reveal to you one of the most important parts of this whole video. And we're going to do this by asking yourself a question, right? What does it take to excel in your career? And I want you to actually think about this. And I'm going to give you like 10, 20, 30 seconds in order to really think. So start now. Because I know a lot of you guys haven't thought about this question. When I ask a lot of people, they haven't thought about what they want to do and how they want their career to pan out. And if you don't have a plan, you're winging it and you're never going to get to how do you even know what success is if you haven't defined it? You'll never know when you get there. So a lot of people have an idea of the skills they want to learn. Like they'll be like, okay, I want to learn modeling. I want to learn BIM. I want to be a good architect. Like they'll have a vague understanding of like what it is, but they won't know exactly where they need to get to. which is strange, because like if you think about it, career is what you do for like 1/3 of your whole life. You're doing 8 hours a day. It's a career. 8 hours a day you're sleeping. 8 hours a day you're just eating, watching TV, blah blah blah. So for something that you do for 1/3 of your whole life, you should have a plan about where you want to get to. So think about, what does it take to excel in your career, right? Don't think about the fact that you don't have a good career now, or like you're not where you are. Just don't worry about that. Think about, what are the skills you need to learn, or like what does it take? What is the knowledge you would need to do? What would you need to be doing on a day-to-day basis in order to excel? Think about that. And hopefully you came up with a few things, because I'm going to do this for architects and engineers. I'm going to do this exercise. And I came up with these things, right? If you're an architect, let's just say that you're a master of Revit. You became a complete master. You now understand the design process for residential and commercial projects, because over time, you started to understand residential and commercial project design. You working on a prison, a hospital, an aged care facility, apartments, houses, all that stuff. Then you understand how all the other disciplines like MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, right? Structural, steel, how that integrates with the design of architecture, and how MEP has to move, the structural have to move, the steel have to move. What is the sort of the design process? What is the construction process? You understand how to make key decisions about altering the architectural design based on the feedback of the engineers later on in the project. So if you're working on a project as an architect, a consultant or an engineer comes to you and asks you some questions and say, hey, can we make this change in architect? Can we lower this ceiling because of this reason? Are you going to say yes? Or are you going to think about it critically? And like, you have to know the thought process behind how to make a decision when it comes to altering something in your project as an architect. That's something that a good architect needs to know, right? Being able to coordinate services around architectural elements. That's something that an architect needs to know, because when you're designing ceiling heights, when you're designing structural stuff, when you're designing sort of the ceiling space, you need to be able to create an environment where MEP engineers are actually able to put their stuff in, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day. If your design looks really nice in theory, the MEP engineers at the end of the day are going to come back to you and say, lower all these ceilings, and then now what you had initially in your mind at the start of the project is not what's getting constructed. So now there's a discrepancy between what you thought and imagined at the start and what it is going to be. So you need to have an understanding, to be a good architect, but how to coordinate services in a way that actually benefits you as well. Being good with multidisciplinary collaboration. Like, you should know how to collaborate with every single other stakeholder in the whole project over time. How to speak, how to communicate, how to talk to engineers, how to talk to architects, how to talk to it's ironic because I couldn't talk, how to talk to people on site. All these things you need to learn how to do, right? And so like, this makes sense. Right, let's see if we can agree on this. Like, learning Revit, understanding the design process, understanding how to coordinate, understanding how to make key decisions about architecture and other stuff. So essentially the coordination process. It makes sense that if you know these things, you will succeed, right? But here is the key thing that I want to tell you, right? This is the actual interesting thing that happens when you start to learn the BIM coordinator skill set as well as the Revit skill set. I want you, and I'm going to actually make this bigger. Think about these 6 things that we talked about. As a Revit modeler, what happens? You become a master of Revit. Okay, good. This is ticked off. I'm going to change this to green. Okay. Understand the design process of residential and commercial projects. Good, because like, as you do more projects and you model more projects, as a Revit modeler, you'll actually understand like key things about design. Like, it's just a function of your experience. Okay, so like, that is also ticked off. Perfect. And you can actually say the same thing about a BIM coordinator, because like, a BIM coordinator will be good at Revit because over time you learn how to do that stuff and you understand the design process because you're dealing with models all the time. Okay. What about the third one? Understand how other disciplines like MEP, structural, still integrate with the design. Like, how are you going to learn that if you're just a modeler doing architectural modeling all the time? You're not going to actually learn it. So the only way to learn that is by becoming a BIM coordinator. So understanding how the other disciplines like MEP, structural, and steel integrate into the design. Okay? You'll know that as a BIM coordinator because you're dealing with MEP, structural, steel on a day-to-day basis, like what I showed you before. Like, this model has everything in it. You can see every single trade and everything that's going to be on site. So you will understand intuitively how other disciplines work with and relate to the design, okay? Understand how to make key decisions about altering the architectural design, being able to coordinate with other services and architectural elements, multidisciplinary collaboration. All that stuff you actually get only in the BIM coordinator skill set. So everything after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're only going to get, and I'm going to change the color, if you transition over to BIM coordinator rather than being a Revit modeler. And this is why I say Revit modeler is good for the first 6 to 12 months of your career. And if you can slowly transition, I mean, a lot of people don't get the privilege of transitioning over very soon. Like it might take 5, 6, 7 years. But if you want to transition over to BIM coordinator, you only learn skill 3, 4, 5, 6, which is what we decided is the best way forward in your career in order for you to thrive. You only learn those things when you transition over to BIM coordinator. So I hope you're starting to connect the dots now and see why Revit modelers struggle in the long run. Like it's a good career, but you might stagnate somewhere, right? BIM coordinator, BIM coordination is what allows you to learn because you're being exposed to so many different ideas, people, talking to people, skills, right? Disciplines. So you start to learn very quickly. It's like, think of it like this, right? When you're in school, and if I just taught you, a lot of people say that when you're in school, they're like, oh, why did I learn differentiation and calculus and integration when I was in high school? Or why did I learn first principles when I was in high school, but I don't ever use it in life now, right? But the thing is, what a lot of people don't understand is it's the multidisciplinary thinking that you apply later on in life. So if I'm trying to explain something to a kid, I have to break it down to the first principles, to the very basic understanding block so I can get my point across. That understanding came from my understanding of first principles, which I learned from math. So there's so many parallels that you can create. Like when you're learning science and you learn like natural selection, that applies a lot to your career, to your business, talking about how you iterate among things and how you actually progress. And like what skill sets die out, what skill sets thrive, and like what you need to learn, what you don't need to learn. You can make so many different parallels between what you learned in high school and what your career is going to be. And that's exactly the same thing as BIM coordination and Revit modeler. Like as you become a BIM coordinator and you expose yourself to all these different things, you actually start to learn in a multidisciplinary way. So you get exposure to so many different things. So you have a big knowledge base of things to talk about. It's like people that go traveling all around the world. You might think it's useless, but it's not, because those people come back. I'm talking as not a traveler, by the way, because I don't travel. But those people will come back and they will have different experiences about different cultures. And like, this is what I've noticed. Like they'll be able to empathize with you, understand you more because like they've experienced your culture. Things like that, right? Whereas someone that's never traveled and has only been in the same country, like the US or the UK or Australia, is just going to know one thing and they're not going to know like what different cultures do. So their mind is closed. So open your mind. How do you unlock your mind? You put yourself in a position where you're exposed to a wide variety of things. I'm essentially telling you to travel in your career. And the only way you're going to travel is not by doing Revit, is by doing BIM coordination. Because doing BIM coordination allows you to expose yourself to different cultures, as per like MEP, structural, steel, coordination, speaking to other people. Okay, hopefully that point landed. What I did want to say is this is actually the reason why some people have stacked and succeeded in their careers, and why people have thrived really quickly and why some people don't thrive really quickly. It's because they were able to stack these skills on top of each other early, so that over time they start to learn everything that they need in order to succeed. Okay, so like this is an interesting concept that I like to tell people about. Let's change this. This is about 1 degree off course policies and course correction, right? So you know a plane back in the day, before we had GPS or sophisticated navigation or any of that stuff, in order to get from point A to point B, it would actually be very difficult because like, you wouldn't know where to go. And the reason it would be difficult is you can't just pick a direction and start going, because even one direction slightly to the northeast of that is going to make you land completely different to where you wanted to get to, right? So like look at it like this. Every 1 degree a plane gets off course, it will miss its target landing spot by 92 feet for every mile you fly. So what does that mean? That means that if you start here and you want to get here in life, right? Or if you start here and you want to get here, this is your target, and you're 1 degree off course, over time, what happens is you get to a completely unrecognizable place, and you can't, like, you need another plane in order to just go from here to here, right? It's a completely different vehicle. So that's the thing, is some people will excel in their career and go up like this into the correct area. Some people will stay stagnant and then just continue over here. And the reason for that is because they haven't invested in learning new skills, because learning new skills is what will get them into the next opportunity in their career. Learning new skills gives you the opportunity in order to learn the things that you need in order to go to the next level. And so that 1% course correction is what will make the huge difference in your career. And like 1% is like tiny. Like a lot of you guys can do huge corrections and learn skills very quickly. 10-20% you can add to your skill base very quickly by investing in yourself and actually being able to close this gap very soon. So this is why I push not only to become proficient in Revit, but also the BIM skill set, which is why I actually made a whole video breakdown. It's linked somewhere below about how to become a BIM coordinator within 6 months, like how I did it and how I transitioned from Revit to BIM, and exactly how you can do it and make money using that. So click that and watch that full BIM training, which is linked down below after this video. Wait till this video finishes. So this is another sort of concept, right? Would it make sense if we talked about Revit and BIM skills in terms of compound and simple interest if I propose it to you like this, right? Think about this. When you're new to Revit, you actually learn a lot for the first 6 to 12 months. And this is when you actually become an expert at Revit and you learn how to create a full construction set of documents with the correct practices and a complete understanding of Revit, a complete understanding of the Revit and BIM workflow in a building, right? So like you're early on in your career, maybe like 1, 2, 3 years into your career, okay? But look at the trajectory of simple interest versus compound interest. This is the same as your skill, your simple skill and your compounding skill, right? So as you get in the correct opportunity vehicle, you course correct every day slowly by putting yourself in positions, in circumstances where you will get, for example, a coordination role or like a coordination small task. Your boss might give you a small coordination task. Then what happens is over time, you start to propel and exceed and you become unrecognizable for the people 10 years into their career who have only been able to stick to the same thing, right? So if you continue to just use the skill in your career that you just developed at the start, you are following this blue line, which is simple interest, but you want to follow compounding interest. And the only way you do that is by stacking skills, okay? So learn BIM coordination, learn MEP basics, learn how to do Navisworks, BIM 360, Revit. Every single time you stack these things on top of each other, create a nice looking CV, create a good looking cover letter, try to optimize that, get into contact with recruiting companies, start doing cold calls, like all these things, you will end up going on this path. And it's about getting into the correct path, because over time, it's just a function of time. When you're on the correct path, time marinates you and gives you the result that you always wanted, okay? So the goal is to actually follow the compound interest line, because as you can see, you become unrecognizable when you get deeper and deeper into your career. So at the start of your career, it doesn't matter what path you take, because as you learn a lot of skills, you land BIM coordination later on, right? But after around a year, if you transition into being a coordinator, then it opens up the path for you to learn the remaining skills that you need in order to grow really fast in your career. As a coordinator, you start to be able to get on the phone with the builder, with all the other contractors. You get good at speaking to other people, good at negotiating, right? All these opportunities are presented to you so you can start to split test and iterate, and then eventually you become a good manager. Then after a year or two, you realize, oh, I'm actually a good manager. Now I can start to manage the office, because you've been talking to other people and doing management within BIM 360, right? It's the only logical step. And there is no future where you do BIM coordination, which is a very highly paying skill that saves companies millions of dollars, and you know Revit and you know BIM, and you start to get yourself in those types of environments where you are given small jobs to do with coordination, and you continue to do that, and you don't become successful, and you don't get the career that you want. There is no reality where, like, think about it. It doesn't make any sense. So the only thing that will happen, The only reality where you fail in the future is if you just stick to one thing and you don't upskill and you don't learn the new skills. So this is actually why I push learning BIM and Revit both very hard as early as possible, because I believe after 6 months, after 12 months, like, you can transition. Like, there's no need to do Revit for the rest of your career. So it's about choosing the correct vehicle, if that makes sense, okay? The only issue is your company, most of the time, will make you stay as a modeler for as long as possible, longer than you actually need to be. So the best thing for you to do is actually go ahead and learn these skills so that you can slowly start to apply the BIM skills when you see these opportunities come up at work. So you get 3-4 years into your career, and you're starting BIM coordination and BIM management. I don't know what I wrote there. Let's skip that. At this point, you've shortcut your career 5-6 years just because someone else would be starting to learn those things that you've already done slowly over time. So what I'm trying to say, I wrote this last night, but what I'm trying to say is if you learn BIM coordination and start to implement that within, like, let's just say after a year, you transition from Revit to then, like, you learn how to set up a project, you learn how to do a clash detection, you do that for like a simple project. Like, you take work off your manager's plate, which is a win for you because you learn, win for him because he has to do less work, win for the company, right? Because the company still makes the same amount of money. So it's like, you learn more, boss works less, he might get credit for it, but you learn more. So later on you become a BIM manager because you get the skill, right? So at this point, now you do that for like for some time, and you start to transition into BIM management because now you learned the skill which enabled you to do the thing. So the boss doesn't have to teach you, because teaching you takes time. So he's not going to take time out of his day because he's busy in order to teach you that stuff, right? And so now you learn things and you succeed in your career, and you get to be put into positions where you're actually helping the company, and you can justify to your boss, your CEO later, hey, I did this BIM coordination thing. I've been doing it for this whole year and helping the boss. That means that I provided the company with this much value. Can I get a pay rise? Like, you have a means to justify that. So hopefully in this video, you understand exactly how to future-proof your career using Revit and BIM. And the key takeaway from this video is that time has to be on your side for you to grow. So the best thing for you to do is learn Revit quickly and learn the BIM skill set as soon as possible. So you can be on the path that you need, right? And don't stress if you haven't learned the BIM skill set yet, because now is the best time to learn it, because the BIM industry is actually going to be, the market cap is doubling from 2024 to 2029. There's going to be $8 billion increase in market size. So like, it is increasing. Now is the time. So you don't feel like you're behind the curve or anything. Like, you're ahead of the curve, which is the best time for you to learn this, so you can actually get on top of this by the time these jobs start to explode and start to pay even more than they already do. All right. So if you want to learn how to do this BIM coordination stuff, I've actually created a full video, like I said before, which is somewhere down below. It's a completely free BIM training where I go through how I became a coordinator within 6 months. I talk about exactly the skills you need. I talk about like my 4 levers of growth. And if you apply those 4 levers of growth, it is impossible, virtually impossible, I guarantee that you will ever fail in your career. And you will always get to the place that you need to go, because it helps you think about how to actually succeed in your career. There's only 4 levers, and I explain all of those in that free BIM training. Click that link and and watch that. So in summary, there's here's my 3-step actionable summary from this video, okay? Learn Revit really well. Learn the BIM skill set really well, okay? Always prioritize speed, never stay stagnant. If you learn Revit, you learn BIM, and you do it now, you're on the right path, and within 6 months, your life can change. And you can be on the correct trajectory, and you never have to worry about learning skills ever again, because now you're in the correct mechanism, the correct vehicle in order to learn the rest of the things, right? So if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, book a call somewhere. I don't know where I've linked it, but I've linked it somewhere. I'm looking for people that are very dedicated and want to learn these things and want to transition from being BIM, normal BIM modelers in order to go to BIM coordination and BIM management. So if that's something that you're interested in learning, you can book a call with me and we can speak about your goals and if I can even help you, and then we can go from there. I'll see you guys in the next video.